Next on the agenda is the Telshor Facility Fund. Leslie Doyle.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council, City staff. My name is Leslie Doyle, and along with my team, Cynthia Alamillo and Natalie Green, we are here today to present on the Telshor Fund. Telshor Facility Fund, or Telshor Fund. Thank you. That's why she's the best team member. So first I want to talk a little bit about the history. While this is not an inclusive list, because there's been a lot of resolutions for the Telshor Fund, this is a list that has really been impactful as it regards in regards to the investments. So Resolution 05128 established the Telshor Fund in 2024, and this used one-time lease proceeds from Memorial Medical Center. We had a total amount that we received of $28.5 million. In 2004, we received $24.4 million of that, and then in 2019, we received the remaining escrow funding. In 2005, Ordinance 2244 authorized long-term investments with the New Mexico State Investment Council. And then in 2007, Resolution 07-378 approved for the funds to be invested into in the Investment Council. 40% of the, 40% of the 10 million was then allocated to be managed by the city, and the remaining 14.4 was invested in the State Investment Council. Large cap equity 30%, small to mid cap equity 20%, and then international equity 10%. Resolution 08112 lifted the moratorium on the use of the funds for health-related services for a 3-year period, and at the time we were allocating an amount not to exceed $300,000 with a combination of Telshor Fund, General Fund, and any other appropriate funding sources. And then in 2013, a resolution was approved, 14-105, that adopted an application and guide so that you could apply for this funding, and then annual resolutions to set nonprofit funding priorities throughout the years. So as I mentioned earlier, there was the city-managed investments of 40% that were managed in the Treasury Department. You can see the rate of return that we received for those funds. I would note that as of 2025, those funds that were managed by the city were fully expended. And then the 60% that is still currently within the New Mexico State Investment Council, you can see the rate of investment that we have on those funds as well. Then I did also want to show the expenditures for the Telshor Fund. You can see it was flat early on, and then as of 23, it did begin to increase. The budgeted expenditures of $13.7 million are not actual, but they are projected and approved budget at this time. And then we also have cash investment inflows and outflows, and I understand that this is a lot of information. So there are 2 areas that I do want to highlight for you. The first is investment income and capital appreciation. You can see from fiscal year 20 to 26, there's a change of 1.4 million to 9.3 million that we increased. I will note that in fiscal 22, there was a significant decrease, which was right in the middle of COVID. So not to be, that's not too surprising, but did want to note that did occur. Additionally, the investment balance as of fiscal 20 was 40.9 million, and now it is 53.5 million. Now, before I turn it over to Cynthia for her part of the presentation, I do want to note that there is a slide at the end that we are going to be requesting some direction from council on how we move forward with this investment. but want to be able to provide the full picture of everything before we have the discussion. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cynthia. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. My name is Cynthia Lamillo. I'm the Capital Improvements Program Manager. And following Leslie's presentation, I want to give you a quick update on the most recent Telshor capital allocations. These are the allocations that were authorized in the fiscal year of 2025. We first start with legacy parks. This is the first time that the Department of Parks and Rec introduced to us the concept of legacy parks. We want to be mindful and in a way recognize all of those city parks that have been the oldest and that we recognize that they need some maintenance. The emphasis for this first round was Apodaca and Young Park, and they got an allocation of $2.5 million. Out of that, we have expended about 1.4 in multiple projects. For Young Park, there were some canopies that were replaced, but some of those expenditures were also allocated to the Young Master Plan. I'm gonna come back for the Apodaca project. Then we also had an allocation of 1.9 for playground replacements and park construction. And here's where we had the ability to complete multiple projects. The remainder of these two set of allocation, which adds up to $2 million, will be fully allocated to the Apodaca Park aquatic playground and multi-use path. This is a very comprehensive project, and some of the upcoming expenditures will be the demolition of the existing pool and then the placement of a new aquatic playground. This project also has a grant, and this funding will help close out that project to ensure that it's fully funded, but there might be a small gap later on. Some of the projects that have been completed with the Telshor funds includes a Pioneer Women's Park playground. From these two pictures, you can see the before and after. We next have the Gus Velakis Park playground, another playground that needed playground replacement. Then we have East Mesa Rec Center Park playground. So as you see, the Parks and Rec had the ability to replace several park playgrounds that were needed. They also did general projects. For example, for the Rongala T-ball field, they improved 8 dugouts. As you can see for the first picture, you can see how it's damaged, and you see the replaced or an improved dugout. There were all 8 dugouts at Rongala and also 8 at the Macville. They also replaced and improved the steps or the seating area at the Fort Hills Park. This is right next to the basketball court. So now you can see that there's a safe area where anybody could just go and take a break while they're playing or just enjoy the park. The other set of projects that received Telshor capital allocations in 25 was facility maintenance projects. 1.1 was allocated, and we have a balance of about 400,000. These projects included the park water fountains, which are still in progress, the Mesilla Valley Community of Hope restrooms, and this is a very important project because the restroom and the shower improvement increase their capacity of 20 showers daily to 40 showers, creating a huge help for the campus. And then they also had general facilities that could be smaller projects. The remaining that they have right now will continue to be allocated to the water fountains to ensure that project gets completed. Another set of projects that received Telshor funding is the Police Real-Time Crime Center, specifically the Intel and Crime Lab. This project is almost done. The department is just working on the final punch list items, which are those little remaining items, and they will use the remaining balance to pay any invoice that's pending. We have the Fire Station 9, where $2 million was given to complete a gap funding. This project is 95% completion, but you will hear more details once we have the goal bond presentation. Lastly, we have 400,000 given to Creek's Walnut Well, and this was just a one-time monitoring well that will just help utilities get more details on the condition of the water and other elements. This is a picture of the improved real-time crime center. This is a picture of the new Fire Station 9, but again, you will see more recent pictures at the Go Bond presentation. So now I'll pass it to Natalie Green for additional information on past expenditures.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Natalie Green for the record. So in addition to health-related public services, there was a number of projects funded over the years. Prior to FY22, we purchased 1101 West Amador. That's the expansion of the Community Hope campus where Amador Crossing is currently being built. We also purchased the Horse and Hound property, which now houses Casa de Peregrinos and the future El Caldito Soup Kitchen. And a portion of those funds were also used to renovate the Horse and Hound into the new food pantry. We also partnered with La Piñon and entered into a lease to purchase agreement for their building. So we pre-purchased their building and are leasing it back to them until they can pay us off. There was also the closure of the emergency shelter, so the city worked with FYI to reopen the emergency use shelter and funded that initiative. It is a now self-sustaining project, so they just needed that initial gap fund to get going. We also piloted the Mano a Mano program and started that program. And then prior to FY22, the only affordable housing investment we had was $577,000, and that was a partnership with the Mesilla Valley Public Housing Authority. Other substantial allocations was for the humanitarian crisis, and so the city was recognized as one of the 13 real-life heroes. We provided funding for that crisis during the asylum seekers coming to the Las Cruces area. And then during COVID, we allocated approximately $3.8 million in various resolutions. And that was in partnership with both city programming and then many of our nonprofit partners to stabilize the community and have some rapid response. In 2023 was really the start where we see other departments getting funded. So we had some allocations to the fire department, the transit, some lift up initiatives, and the police athletic league, the PAL boxing. And those were about 3.1. More recent allocations, specifically to housing and neighborhood services. So we are funding the SOS program in partnership with Municipal Corps, and then we have some annual allocations for the continuation of Mano a Mano, our street outreach program, and this is the first year that we're funding security services out of the Telshor Fund for both Community Hope and the Amador Crossing. We have used the Telshor Fund pretty extensively to make pre-commitments for affordable housing projects. Those pre-commitments have resulted in either match funding or reimbursement funding from the state of New Mexico. So only $11.4 million has actually come out of the Telshor Fund for affordable housing projects. Everything else is either reimbursed or the state provided those funds. So we have a pretty good return on investment. So it's about a 15-to-1 return on investment. So that 11.4 has generated $170 million in outside investment from either equity investors or other funding sources to build those projects. So we have 568 new units in multifamily, and then we have about 114 single-family units, 478 multifamily units in pre-development, and then I'll talk about it in my Go Bond presentation, but we have, for the first time, some renovation projects for affordable housing. And so the three projects funded out of the Telshor Fund is Three Sisters, Peachtree Phase 2, and Amador Crossing. And then the health-related public services has been funded since fiscal year 2009. That was when the moratorium was first lifted and this program was created. And so annually, this project has been funded by various councils. It started at $300,000 per year, And then in fiscal year 19, it was adjusted to 400,000, and then in fiscal year 23, it was bumped up to 600,000. It is a competitive selection process conducted by the Health and Human Services Advisory Committee through the council-adopted application and policy guide. This is a graph. I apologize, I recognize it's a little bit busy, but just to show, in the blue bars is the amount of funds that were requested, in the gray bar is the amount of funds awarded, and then the trend lines are that's the lines, and the bars are the number of applications we received, or the value of applications we received. So early on, we were getting 30 applications per year. It's dropped off over the years, and we've been able to fund about 50% of the applications that we were getting. You'll note in FY21 was when we went up to the 600,000 at the next cycle, because we were getting significantly higher requests than what we were awarding. As a community impact, so we funded 17 organizations this fiscal year. Those collective organizations served approximately 228,000 people. And some of that is duplicated or unduplicated depending on the agency. So amazing return on investment for service for our community. Some high-level goal or high-level impact that those organizations, I didn't get to put all 17, so I only did a few, but El Caldito served over 153,000 meals. That's both breakfast and lunch to members of our community. This year, Community Action Agency expanded their services 150% for their family emergency program, so they served 940 people this year. La Piñon is, with Telshor Fund, served 344 survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. Part of their building purchase also allowed for the expansion of other forensic exams, so they're able to do forensic exams for child abuse cases and domestic violence cases, so that improves the conviction rate for those services. Boys and Girls Club has been saving families approximately $1 million a year in child care expenses, and so they're a very high impact youth development program. This year, Community Hope, through their SOAR, which is their expedited Social Security program, served 155 people, and so by allowing, helping a person access those Social Security programs, there's a return on investment of almost $12,000 back into the local economy, especially if they get housed and are covering their rent. And then this year, Roadrunner Food Bank is serving about 656 households a month, and that includes 1,100 children per month with food services. And then many of the agencies also sent me other goals and objectives, but I know they're in the audience, so they can speak to their programs as well if I missed them. Some recommendations or considerations around the HRPS program. One, we want to evaluate the HRPS committee. Again, there's only 3 members on that committee. It usually requires 7, so in order for it to be a robust award selection process, then we really need a full committee and for them to evaluate and score those applications. This year is the first year. We're recommending moving to 2-year service agreements. So our service agreements, because we fund this every 2 years, we'll do a 1-year service agreement with an option for renewal. So that'll eliminate the need to rewrite service agreements every year. We also want to work with the committee over the next year to review the application and guide. There was a request from one of the agencies to consider electronic submissions, so we may look at that again. Also evaluate the award amounts, so adjusting those minimums and maximums. Considering changing the presentation format, so all nonprofits have to present to that committee. So as part of that evaluation, figure out if those presentations are still valuable to that committee or figure out a different format for that. And then from the nonprofits, I did hear the desire to maintain those equitable distributions. I know there was some commentary about each agency as part of HRPS getting the same dollar amount. So their feedback is they wanted to keep that. I will now pass it back to Leslie to start us off with our discussion.
you, Natalie. So as promised, we have the opportunity now to look at the future outlook and investment strategy for the Telshor Fund. All of our Telshor Fund is currently held in investments at the New Mexico State Investment Council. And I would point you to the chart that has an investment balance in fiscal year 26 of 53 million. It is important to note that we started with 24 million as an initial investment, and then all of the things that both Cynthia and Natalie have talked about and that we have been able to, impact the community with, and we still have a significant investment. So I think it's important to note that. But what we need from council is guidance on what to do with the investment, because it is not liquid. So we don't have the cash that we need. So should we withdraw the entirety of the investment and invest it locally here at the city, or sell investments as needed, and then as the expenses occur, we can, sell the investment to get the cash in order to do that. Because there is such a good rate of return, you saw earlier, we've been really hesitant to sell that because the rate of return is really good. So I do want to keep that in mind as part of the discussion. Additionally, it is a large investment. I am not a financial advisor and would like perhaps the opportunity to consult with a financial advisor to help them look at the allocations that we currently have, as well as any changes that we might be able to make that we could increase our return on investment even more. And then also from council, what is the future spending plan so that we do know how we can invest? What that future investment strategy depends on how council intends to expend the fund. So that's the guidance that we need from council at this point, is how to move forward.
All right, thank you, Leslie. Councilor Corinne?
Thank you, as always, for your presentation, Cynthia and Natalie, too. Just at a very basic level, if I remember the last time we had this conversation, the State Investment Council only promises like a 2% return or something, don't they? Like, I don't know what if they suggest, I know it's like 2,000 investments and it's a very like complicated thing, but my sense from before when we were talking about this, which was not one of the double-digit return years, was that they were really bullish in how much investments in the State Investment Council would bring in, and it's obviously overperforming like all investments, most investments at this moment are. I'm wondering, I don't think that that's going to be a forever, I know that you just said you're not a financial advisor. I don't think 10% is a reasonable return to expect on any investment in any market except this exact moment. So I'm curious if you think, what is the definite amount of return on investment that we could expect for whatever we keep in the State Investment Council? And then to me, that's a very important variable in whether or not we leave things there or not. My tendency, it's produced a lot of money, is to leave as much as we can and to make liquid only the things that we need as they go along. But I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about that. Because obviously our return on investment when we had the money wasn't as good. But the market was also different, et cetera, et cetera. So can you talk a little bit about that speculatively, please?
Yes, Mayor, Councilor Coran, I would agree that 10% is not something that is probably sustainable over a long period of time. As far as what the State Investment Council, guarantees, or I'm not familiar with that. I've never heard of them guaranteeing a certain rate of return, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of research to see if that is in fact the case. But I guess just to put a finer point on what you said, 10% is not something that I would expect year over year for multiple years. But we also did, do better with this investment than we did internally.
So thank you. That I know it's too much it's a lot of speculation, but I appreciate your insight, and it's sort of what I guess I'm I imagine. I shouldn't have said guarantee. I don't mean that. I think we just talked about like what can we expect under all conditions overall. And I'm wondering if you can go back to that graph really quickly.
6.
Sorry. So yes, for me, this is just a wild return on investment slide that I do think we should hire a financial advisor to help us with, frankly, because this is not real or like very hard to establish something or expect something. But I guess I would say my recommendation would be one, that we take out what we need and keep the money with the State Investment Council while we're still figuring out what to do with the rest. And I also would say, I do acknowledge that holding on to a rate of return like this, we're a city entity. We're here to help people. We're not here to make money. So I think for me, fundamentally, that's one of the things that I think is really important in this. But I do think we should balance those two things by keeping some money in investments and spending it as the liquidity goes on. So thank you. And again, I support hiring a financial advisor. If we're going to take it all out and give it to the city, I would hope we would hire someone from the State Investment Council, I guess, to help us figure out what to do with it. But it seems like this is a pretty good place to keep our money.
Thank you. Councilor McClure.
Thanks, Mayor. I guess I'm going to supplement a little bit what Councilor Coran said, and maybe kind of highlight where I think on money. It's one of those sort of lucid things that in my life. What are we saving for? And I think one of those questions too is when you talk to lay people and they say, oh, we have billions of dollars in our coffers in the state and we're saving it for a rainy day. And people feel like it's raining. So I am also of the mindset of, yeah, get a financial advisor, because like people who do this for a living, it's not going to last forever like this, right? Can we leverage for things where it is actually raining? I'm thinking of, we have a heat wave. The library is a cooling station. Can we pay for what we're saving in those hours for the Sunday library through this, right? Things that are actual immediate needs. I would say too, like if we have projects like the MRA, and we can supplement, say, the Boys and Girls Club too, to see that we build that catalyst there, that people see a future that they want to live in, right? That's where I'm always focusing on. These couple of things where we're making things happen now is kind of where I've always been focused on as well. So, but I'm not a financial person. So I want to say that we are doing this in a responsible way. We do need to have more people on that committee, like Natalie said as well, to have sort of those robust conversations, right? Because need sometimes does change, and focus might change sometimes. And I think that's a hard conversation to have, and we should have those with people who are invested in that and have the background to have that conversation and know a little bit more than perhaps some of us on council. I'll speak for myself and not council at that point, so thank you.
Councilor Harris.
Thanks, Mayor and Leslie and Natalie, for the presentation. It was, as someone who's relatively new and has been vaguely aware of the Telshor Fund for a long time, this was all very enlightening. I guess I also agree that State Investment Council seems to have had a pretty good return. That is obviously a lot to continue to expect forever, but we've got it right now, and I say we ride it as long as possible. So, I think keeping it here, selling it as needed to have liquidity to pay out the contracts that we've got, I think that's the course now, and that seems like a reasonable course for the future. I'm not sure that we could do better as a city. I guess the state already has financial advisors and people whose sole job it is to keep this fund going for all the municipalities. So, hiring our own people and trying to do this in-house might not be as disastrous as when I try to pick my own stocks. But, probably, it seems like we're getting decent rates here. As for spending priorities, I too worry about like what's going to happen when this money is gone. And so, we started with 24, we've got 30 right now, so we're doing pretty good. But I also don't want us to get into a situation where we spend it all and then organizations that have come to rely on a yearly distribution of $600,000 of that money don't have it anymore. At the same time, if we could spend it all on some magic wand and then solve all of the problems, and then we don't need that in the future, that would be great, but I don't think that's the case. So that's what I want to be careful on. Drawing it down is, maybe not drawing it down for operational type expenses, but keeping in mind that there are projects that can leverage a lot more money, like what Natalie was presenting on. If we can use it as matching funds, we can get a 60% return on investment if we use it as matching funds, if you want to think of it that way. So, see if I had any other specific questions. I guess another just concern that I'll throw out, and I hope that the NMSIC is thinking about it, is, and also it's related to us managing it ourselves, there's some pretty unstable forces in the current market right now, and I just want to make sure that we're not exposed to that as much as possible, although I know some of the exposure is being forced by forces beyond our control. So those are my thoughts for now. Thanks.
Matisse, did you have? Councilor Matisse?
Natalie, is the corpus, how close are we to getting into the corpus, the original amount?
Mayor, Councilor Matisse, the corpus was about 28 million, and if we expend all of our 27 budgeted expenditures, our ending balance would be 30 million, so give or take 2 million before we begin to utilize the corpus.
Yeah, I agree with Councilor Harris. I like to see that at least not, touched, and of course we could make more money and still do all the good deeds that we're doing. And I realize Ms. Green has some even payments coming back to the Telshor Fund from some loans. So it looks positive that it could go to 35, or maybe 40,000. And I'd like to see that happen. I think it's good that the city has another reserve just besides the 212s. And then you could guarantee the 600,000 a year to the nonprofits. And that would be for perpetual. That's the way it was designed. It was designed that it just wouldn't be expended totally, and then you don't have 600,000. It could go maybe to a million in a couple of years if interest rates and return of investments are good. But I would like to see that that bundle preserved, and then all the good deeds come out of the the interest. Rather than the corpus. And if there's even a little extra, that's just smart investment on our part. So that would be my direction. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilors, thank you for putting the presentation together, Leslie. So my thought as we look into this is definitely we do need subject matter experts, and we look towards you and other experts that we have around the state. At the point in time that we're in today, and I think Councilor McClure mentioned this, rainy day fund. We talked about the rainy day fund from the state level. And it's someday, rainy day. There's no someday on the calendar, right? I know that when my son was little, we would say, oh, let's save this cookie for a rainy day, and it's, oh, Mom and Dad, it never rains in Las Cruces, right? We're kind of at a juxtaposition right now where people have food insecurity, people need food, we're stressed out about affordability, and so as we look at some of these projects, I'd like to hear and see a needs analysis of the organizations we're supporting to see where the needs are. If I look at I think it was page 19 or 26, we're funding half of what organizations are asking for. You know, if we invest anemically, we'll probably get anemic results. And that's not what we want to do to be effective and to govern effectively and to help people out effectively. So I would say let's look at, with our subject matter experts, what we can do. Let's look at the organizations and the folks that we're supporting and prioritize where we can see some positive impact. And that rainy day, I mean, it's here. It's here. As a state, we are doing well financially. If we wait to spend that money in the future, you know, $10 billion will be less in the future, if that makes sense, because of inflation and just cost of goods that, you know, will continue to increase year over year. So I would suggest that we do that and see where we can prioritize and see where we can most effectively spend our resources. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Corinne.
Sorry, this is just a quick follow-up on that conversation. I think that the time that we talked about this prior was when we talked about the 300 and then the 400 and then the 600, which I think I was on council at that time. I wasn't there for the other two conversations, but that was the interest-based amount that came from the corpus at that time, roughly. I think that's what we made that decision based on. I'm not 1,000% sure, but my memory of our conversation about that was that the interest was outperforming what we had been awarding, and so we were sort of amassing a lot of money, $53 million at some point in time. And so I'm just curious if that's still reflective, sort of to Mayor Pro Tem Munoz's question, if that's still reflective of the amount of sort of expected interest profits. It sounds like it's a little bit less than what we would expect, and if that's something else that we should reconsider as part of the conversation, is what, in addition to two-year contracts, which I also hope we can do with the agencies and reduce the administrative burdens for the small amount of money that we're actually giving each organization, I would wonder if it's possible to expand that amount to something else. So that would, I guess, is a question sort of for future consideration, or if you know better, I'd love to hear it.
Mayor, Councilor Coran, I guess for clarification, do you mean just interest, or do you also mean the appreciation of the investment?
That's what I don't really remember, how we arrived at $600,000, and that's the part that I'm not completely sure of. I think that was just the interest, the expected interest, not the appreciation that's happening at a different rate than we would expect. But I'm not 100% sure of that. I just wanted to clarify where that measure came from, and then the money that we've taken out recently came from us having this conversation, which is, it is raining. We have $53 million that we're sitting on. We need to address essential services that we have in the discussion of 26 and 27, but I guess the 600,000 question is one that I also would like to know more about, if you can share.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Corinne. So the 600,000 increased in between FY21 and FY22, and if you recall in the presentation at that time, we were not using the Telshor Fund for any of the other department or operational programming. So that was the consideration of the council at the time, was there's an increase in need for nonprofits. Let's increase the the annual allocation and we're able to fund more nonprofits. Since then, we've seen the Telshor used for capital improvements, some of these allocations, the parks, facility maintenance, so we're seeing that investment go down. And then for affordable housing, the 11.4. So I guess that would be possibly also part of the discussion is, if I'm hearing council correctly, we want to see the continuation of the HRPS program for nonprofits at a possible increase if the interest allows it. And also these one-time sort of instrumental significant projects like Boys and Girls Club or capital improvements. Is that what I'm hearing from council?
That's what I'm I'm saying, and I'm sort of hearing in Councilor Munoz, but like I know that I understand that this FY26 and FY27 is not a sustainable model for how we're spending the money. Like I think I think you're trying to convey that to us, and I think we understand that. So in that context, I think understanding what the future plan is what you're wanting us to talk about. So yes, from my perspective, you summed up what I'm getting at, and I do have a desire to reduce this that we're doing related to the transfers for big projects, if we can, or if we can leverage in ways that we can. I am here for that, but I also think that the nonprofits are serving thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, and I think if we have enough money to give them more, I would ask that we do.
And I think that can be a discussion we have with the financial advisor. Yeah, I'll defer to Leslie on that one.
Yes, thank you.
Councilor
Yes.
Matisse?
Yeah, I think, Natalie, if you maintain the corpus, if you keep at least 28 million, then if your investment is getting 8 to 10% a year, can we use that figure, or 7%? What percentage you want to use?
I would love to use 10%. I'm just
No.
not sure that it's realistic.
Isn't it going to go crazy? Interest rates? No. Okay, what do you want to use? 4%, 2%, 3%?
Mayor, Councilor Matisse, I think a 4 to 5% rate of return
Okay,
is probably more reasonable than what we currently
Okay, so
have.
let's say 4% on 30 million. You have 1.2 million that you'd be earning. It looks like from what's happened over the last 8 to 10 years, we've had so many rainy days, we spent almost 22 million. Correct? I mean, that went from corpus of 28 to 54. And in the last 8, 5, 7 years, it's been 4 million here, 2 million there, 1 million there, 2 million another. And now we're down to 30 million. And so we have to be careful of just doing these rainy day ideas again for the next 5 or 6 years, and we'll be down to zero. Because, we spent 22 million pretty fast. And so I would like to see the council secure that corpus, don't by ordinance, by consensus, by something, but don't go below 28 million. And then you guarantee the 600,000 to $1 million a year for these nonprofits. So you could you could go from 600,000 to $1 million if you have at least $28 million. But if you have 10 million or 5 million or zero, then you have nothing. You have zilch. You have zero for those nonprofits. So that's just my statement.
All right, thank you, Leslie.
I just want to say I'm in favor of keeping it as it is. And then with the contract of a financial advisor or financial expert, I would definitely be in favor of that. Not only to look at this fund, but also what is one of our dilemmas that we're facing here at the city is our expenditures and our revenues. And I know there's a couple of committees, so you're going to take the time to get a financial advisor. Let's get someone that can also look at that and help our budget overall, so we're deciding whether to spend or not to spend with the Telshor Fund. The other thing is keep it as is, but if a crisis or an emergency, then we can always bring it to council and see how we look at those things. I know we spent a lot of money quick, but it wasn't just a rainy day. It was also over the course of years of things that were neglected and needed to be kept up or redone, and it's costly, and we know that. But the other thing is future spending plans is, I think that's something that is ongoing, but right now we do have our strategic plan in process. So that's a tool that we should be able to use, and again, give that information to the financial advisor as time goes on. These are some of the strategic plans that are going on with the city, with the organization, with the community. And we've also got another survey and strategic plan on homelessness, mental health, and substance abuse that's going on. Once those are completed, we get a better idea, a better view of which direction we want to head and where we want to start spending some money for the betterment of the community.
Thank you, Mayor. If I may just make sure that I'm understanding council's direction correctly. We're all in agreement that a financial advisor is the direction we want to go. Additionally, we want to keep the investments to the extent that we can in the State Investment Council and sell as needed for liquidity. And then finally, we want to make sure that we keep the corpus whole so that we can continue to provide those annual allocations for the nonprofits. Did I
Yes,
understand
I
that
believe-
correctly?
Yes.
Yes, I think we're in agreement with that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Next on the agenda is the GeoBond quarterly update.